Today we're going to have a lesson on how to use substitution and pairing that with order of operations. So to begin, think about a substitute teacher. That substitute teacher fills in for the teacher when they're absent, and they do everything that the teacher does. So in math, we're going to use substitution the exact same way, but with numbers. So let's first do a review of the order of operations. Last year we learned it using GEMDAS. And some of us remember PEMDAS, but they mean the exact same thing. And this is just the order that helps us remember how we're going to do our math problems. So the first letter there is the G, and the G stands for those grouping symbols. Things like parentheses and brackets. Anything that's grouping things together, even absolute value, can be a grouping symbol that we have to do first. Everything inside of that gets done first step. The next thing that we're going to work on would be an exponent, and that's when you have that little number to the right and above of a normal number. Then multiplication, division. Remember, multiplication, we could have a dot or the X. Division, you can have the division symbol. You could also have a slash, or if you have a fraction, that can also mean to divide. And then adding and subtracting are pretty straightforward there. So we use these symbols and the word GEMDAS to help us remember what order we need to solve problems in when there's more than one step. So let's talk about how substitution works. In substitution, we always are working with variables. And a variable is the term that we use for a symbol for a number that we don't know yet. Usually, it's a letter, like X or Y. When we substitute, we replace the variable with the value that is given. And remember, our variables are going to be those letters. So our variables are going to be our letters. So write that in your notes. And then the value is going to be that number that's given. So let's look at a pretty simple example. In this example, I have a plus 2, and it tells me that a equals -5. So I've got my very first step is to substitute. I can't solve it yet. I don't have what a is, so I need to substitute what a is, which is that -5. I'm going to take that -5 and put it right into the spot where a is. To keep me straight, I'm going to make sure that I put that new number in parentheses so that that negative stays with the 5. And then I need to write down the rest of the problem exactly how I saw it. That first step is we don't do any math, we're just putting that number in for the letter. Now that I have it written down, I can go ahead and solve. Remember, my adding rules say that if I have a negative and a positive, I need to look at the higher absolute value to give the sign. My absolute value of -5 is larger, so my answer is going to be negative, and then I need to subtract 5 minus 2 to get the number, so 5 minus 2 is 3, so my solution is a -3. Sometimes we can also have more than one variable, so I have my steps down here. We're going to rewrite them a little bit easier. So my first step, it says, is to rewrite the entire problem and replace variables with values. That's a typo right there. So our steps here, I'm going to change all of the variables into numbers. The second step is to actually solve using GEMDAS. So I'm going to write that down using my order of operations. Alright, so let's try it in this example. I have y plus x squared. So now I'm going to take my value for y, which is that -3, and I'm going to put it in where y is. Remember, in those parentheses. Then I'm still adding, I'm writing down the rest of my problem here. And now I have x equals 10, and I'm going to put that in for where x is, in parentheses. Whenever I substitute, I put that number in parentheses so that I can solve it later. In my order of operations, even though I do have grouping symbols, there's nothing to do inside of that. Those are just integers. So I'm going to move on to my exponent step. My exponent step, I do have an exponent. I have this 2 up here, so I need to do 10 squared. To solve 10 squared, you do 10 times 10, and that gives me the value of 100. And then bring down the rest of your problem that I haven't used yet. And now I'm looking for multiplication and division. I don't have any multiplication or division, so I'm moving on to the next step, adding and subtracting. I only have one more operation here, so I'm going to do -3 plus 100. Again, I have a negative and a positive, so I'm looking for the higher absolute value, which is from 100, so my answer is going to be positive. And then subtract 100 minus 3 equals 97 for my final answer. Most of the time when we see substitution, we're using them in formulas. So I have a section of our formula sheet that we get to use on the SOL right up here in the top corner of my screen. And I also have a rectangle that we're going to be using. Our directions say to find the area and the perimeter of this sandbox. So this rectangle here is actually a sandbox, and I'm going to find both of these values. So let's start out with the area. I know I'm finding the area. I'm looking on my formula sheet, and my formula for area is L times W. The L is the length of the rectangle, and the W is the width. So now I'm going to rewrite my formula, but instead of these variables, I'm going to fill them in. Let's just start by writing the formula, and now I can substitute the values from my rectangle so I can solve my problem. I still don't know what the area is, so I'm just going to keep my A. The length of this rectangle is 6 feet. And again, I'm going to keep that in parentheses. And then the width of this rectangle is 2. Put that into parentheses as well. So now I'm ready to solve using GEMDAS. I don't have any parentheses and nothing to do inside of those parentheses. I don't have exponents, so I'm ready to multiply and divide. I just have one step here, so I'm going to multiply it. My area of this rectangle is 6 times 2, which is 12. Don't forget your labels. These are feet. And then remember, area always has our units squared. Let's go ahead and look at perimeter now. My first step is always to rewrite the formula. So I'm looking at that formula sheet. I see that P equals 2L plus 2W. So my first step, I don't do any math. I'm just going to fill in my variables with the values from my problem. I'm trying to find the perimeter so the P stays the same. Instead of L, I'm going to put in parentheses that 6. And then instead of W, I'm going to put in parentheses that 2. Now I'm ready to start solving with order of operations. I don't have anything inside any grouping symbols. I don't have exponents. I do have some multiplication. So I'm going to go ahead and solve from left to right, whichever one comes first. So 2 times 6 is 12. I'm going to bring down the rest of my problem. One step at a time here. I can't skip steps. Now, before I can add with the 12 plus 2, I need to multiply 2 times 2. So I'm going to bring down my problem. 2 times 2 is 4. And now I just have addition. 12 plus 4 equals 16. And don't forget your units. Remember, we were talking about feet, and perimeter is just plain old feet. I do not square perimeter. Area gets squared, perimeter does not. So we've gone through how to solve using substitution and order of operations, a quick review. So we're going to really be using formulas in our practice because that's getting ready for our future units in 7th grade.